First of all, I'd like to tell you to stay tuned because I'm gonna show you and explain why this garden looks like this and show many plants you haven't seen in your life before. So I've been struggling with depression for a long time now. It has taken a high toll on my life. I don't remember when it started, but I've been wanting to know when does it finally wear down. I'm not a productive person as I once were, and I'm failing to bring a company from zero to hero. And I don't even want to get a master's or PhD degrees, because at the rate Einstein got himself published with his papers, he would be unkindly kicked out of his position as a researcher in today's world. It's not to compare myself to him, but just to admit that this life is maybe not for me. Academia sucks in Brazil because the government doesn't care much to invest on it in research. Even though I learned everything I know from academia and I'm very grateful for it, when metrics become goals, they're not good metrics anymore. Don't get me wrong, I love my profession and I wouldn't change forestry engineering for anything else. These days it was my birthday, and having a birthday close to Christmas makes me double amount of times more reflectful. I don't know if that's a word, but it makes me reflect a lot more. And I just wanted to do something I love and understand, to cope with my perceived failure in life, to remind myself yet again, why have I been so contrary to what society demands from people? I have always been the punk, the metalhead, the misfit. This noise you hear in the background is my dog scratching herself. Most people would think this is a mess of a garden, a complete waste of space and negligence on my part to allow the garden to be in this state, to reach this state. It so happens that when I arrived in this place, the soil was red, barren, there was no plants at all. There were only tall grasses and weeds, lots of gravel. And with a little work put into it, I planted a few saplings, a few seeds, and through the process of natural succession and my sporadic intervention at key times, the whole thing started to change. And it's been a decade now. It looks like it, doesn't it? It started with what I planted, a lot of pioneer species, along with a few climax species that could handle the harsh degraded soil. And so I planted some food, yes, but when the first trees started to reach a certain a height, occupy their reachable outcomes, the birds came in bigger numbers and sowed whatever was in their guts as well. And that happened because the insects showed up to pollinate the flowers, so the birds could feed on the insects, and they spread their feces, and in their feces there are a lot of seeds, of course. And the first tree I planted, I remember it fell due to white rot, and when it rained really, really strong, there was a storm and the tree fell down. It was like 6 meters already, and it fell on a neighbor's wall. I'm glad it was like a slow process. It fell down really slow, so it didn't damage the wall. I had to cut it. The second tree I planted, I had to cut because it had fulfilled their role already in the system. Many other shrubs and crops are also gone now. All despite seeming like a bad thing, they prepared the soil for everything that was yet to come. I planted coffee, bananas, pineapple, blackberry, a tuber called taioba, turmeric, passion fruit, cassava, and many other plants. Now the system became so much better than it can host Amazonian and Atlantic rainforest species that only grow in certain conditions like cocoa, guarana. Not that I have them here, but I could. The soil is now rich and fluffy, and it became darker and darker with the biodegradation of the organic matter that I usually chop down and organize in the floor, in the system floor, that also tripled the number of worms, and the roots decompacted the soil underground as well. I don't even need to water it anymore in the dry season of the Brazilian savanna, the Cerrado, when we have 6+ months without a single drop of water. Even if I cut everything down, I wouldn't have to start in the same situation because of the better soil that retains more nutrients and humidity. So, to a lot of people, it looks like a mess, sure, but to me, it looks like I achieved a nice result with my experimental ornamental agroforestry garden, at least in my eyes, in which I don't need cages to hear the birds. They come and go as they please. Many different species of birds. I always wake up to them singing. The smell is like of a rural property, my ultimate dream and goal, which I will reach someday and plan my retirement with the same kind of system. Though it won't be ornamental and free-handed as this one, because I've learned how to organize it in a better way to produce more food and wood as nature does its part on its own. You see, the objective here was only to have a nice looking garden, at least in my eyes again. I guess the conclusion here is the same. We need to do the same with our lives. Plant one thing at a time and allow the soil, but you can call it soul in this analogy, to become enriched with nutrients so we can escape this barren reality inside of our own minds. I have already overcome the hard gravel, so I at least feel like it. And reality now is that even if starting from scratch, it is not an absolute zero anymore because of the past experiences. And yes, I know it still looks like a jungle, and there's a lot I couldn't do this week, but hear me out on this. Just like the garden, the work in our lives is never done, never truly done, and never will be, at least while we're still alive. I hope this video inspired you somehow and brought you a different perspective on things. The final lesson here, I suppose, is doing what we can with what we have in a good way and with a good will. Never being ashamed of what we have come so far to achieve. I guess I could compare my garden to a pristine Victorian style garden. But in my perspective, even with experience in landscaping, it looks and feels way better. Also because my neighbors, they pass by and compliment it often. And they're not bothered at all with all the trees and the leaves. Whereas I surely would be scolded by HOA if I lived in America.